Welcome, everyone, to the PFF Fantasy Podcast, IDP edition. I'm John Macri, and we are back with more offseason IDP content. And the 2025 offseason is already in full swing, with it being Combine Week. There's rumors that are swirling. Free agency's right around the corner. It's kind of the perfect time to get a jump on some clutch dynasty moves to improve our rosters, whether it's buying or selling, whether it's meant for retooling your contending roster or going for that perfect rebuild. We're going to try and precog some dynasty IDP moves that are going to help you either way and get a jump on some of those values to help you right now. So let's get it. All right, let's get to some moving and shaking for our IDP Dynasty rosters, and helping me do so, a great mover and shaker in his own right, a brilliant mind from the IDP world, an IDP show and RSO content star, my guy, the great Jake Kohlhagen is in the house. Jake, what is up, my man?
John, your platitudes are well received here. Thank you, sir. You're too kind. It's great to be back. It's always great to chop it up with you. I love talking ball, and I love the idea of perfecting that dynasty roster. At any point in the season. So I'm happy to jump on and start talking about some of these buys, some of these sells, and hopefully helping people get ahead of the game here a little bit in late February.
Yeah, absolutely, man. We're going to look at it as, kind of dynasty moves to make now, but like some of these moves you can make before free agency, maybe save some value and get ahead of things. Other times you can make it at any point during the offseason, just depending on how things go. So, I appreciate you coming on to help me break it all down and go through some of these players. We're going to run through our IDP dynasty moves that we can make. And each of us have a buy and sell pick for linebacker, defensive line, and defensive back. So math tells me that is 12 players that we'll be discussing. I'm sure there are other plenty moves that we could possibly have added, but we've settled on our top 12 that are, not just doable, but kind of make the most sense for us to target this offseason as we're heading into free agency and aiming to make those dynasty rosters better right now. Sometimes, that'll be the context of like contenders. Other times it's for, rebuilds and buying and selling. But either way, we'll hint on that as we go. So Jake, what do you say we get into it here? And let's start with the defensive backs to kind of get them out of the way, because let's be honest, almost all top performers make sense to sell in IDP at this position, and it rarely makes sense to buy them. But we've still identified some buys and sells that are worth highlighting, kind of value-wise in particular. So Jake, why don't you give us your first defensive back to buy/target this offseason?
Absolutely. And you nailed it perfectly there. Jaden Hicks is who we're looking at here for the Kansas City Chiefs. When we look at what their roster looks like for us, we got Justin Reed, who primarily played ahead of him here for Jaden Hicks' rookie year. But Reed's contract is expiring this offseason. Now, there is plenty of talk that the Chiefs like Reed as a leader and do want to bring him back. However, their contract situations overall, or their cap space overall, even with the huge bump that I think was official today now. They still got some finagling to do there. So there's no guarantee that Reed is coming back. So for me, Jaden Hicks is someone, when you look at how the Chiefs have utilized that safety position, Justin Reed was third in the box snaps total among all NFL defensive backs this last year. And when you look at something like that, that's exactly what we're looking for in terms of utilizations for defensive backs, right? It just gives us a greater chance to have them make plays when we look at them. Hey, they're lining up closer to the ball versus, these deep snaps or outside alignments that we can see from other defensive backs. So, that said, and then apologies. Also, when I'm talking about the Chiefs' salary cap situation, they don't have a lot of moves that they can make in terms of saving a lot of money either, unless they get some players to actually start to restructure contracts. Obviously, Patrick Mahomes is the big one. So, but now when we look at the end of the year and the actual utilization for Jaden Hicks, it's not just that, hey, he is the next man up type thing. We actually saw that he started to get run in terms of that box utilization and what they want to do with him potentially. So I know you got the numbers pulled up here. You can see already a 37% box snap rate. that was when weeks 1 through 16, 1 through 17-ish, he really wasn't playing a ton of snaps in there. However, once they got into week 18, which is a situation where they're resting starters, and that's why he got more opportunities there. So you can see that he is the direct fill in to Justin Reid when he is not available. He started to get even more run in that position or that type of utilization throughout the playoffs. And I mean, I don't know about you, but for me, those are some pretty key games, right? And if you're talking about taking a rookie and putting them into those types of situations, they obviously have trust for them. He's proven he can do it. I think that Jaden Hicks is someone who's likely to step up into this role and get a big value bump if Justin Reid is not brought along for the 2025 season, or maybe it's a 1-year thing, or they just start to do a rotation and Jaden Hicks becomes a primary role for the box, or he's rotating in and out with Reed, maybe with Chamari Connor and Nickel. There's all kinds of things that they could do there, and Spags is a guy who gives us plenty to look at when it comes to defensive concepts and utilization. So for me, I'd say buy him now before free agency. No one really knows what's up. Obviously, if Justin Reid does get brought back, I'd still consider buying him because the value potentially should be lower, or at least have a lower perception. You go get him for, whatever, a 5th round pick, and just stash him on your roster for going forward, or seeing what they do with him in the 2025 season.
Yeah, I like Jaden Hicks. I liked him coming out of this past year's rookie class, I guess it was. And, I don't think it should be a surprise to anyone that he didn't get that kind of starter level work, like as a rookie in Kansas City, right? Like you said, regardless of their depth chart, we just rarely see Steve Spagnuolo's operate that way. The promising thing for me, like you said, is that they were utilizing him a lot more in the latter half of the season and into the playoffs. And, while there's maybe a small part of that has to do with Chamari Connor missing time, but Hicks and Connor played different roles, where Connor played the nickel and Hicks was very clearly a safety. So they weren't like directly tied to each other, even if there was some like indirect benefit for Hicks's playing time as DBs shifted slightly with Connor out. But the want for me, like with Hicks as a rookie coming in and early in his career, I guess for now, is that he'd get kind of utilized in that old Daniel Sorensen role in Spags' defense, kind of how you're alluding to, where he maybe isn't a full-time player. But if people remember Sorensen, like he was not a good NFL player, by the way, but he had his moments of IDP value because of the role that he was deployed in as a box-heavy rotational safety. So Hicks was a rotational safety. He got some time in the box, but more than anything, just getting on the field was the important part. And the other optimistic aspect of this, like you laid out, is Justin Reid being a scheduled free agent. He was the team DB leader in box snaps by far. We know, like you said, there's a chance that the Chiefs bring him back, but we know that the Chiefs will let starters walk in free agency and replace them with their draft picked guys, like as the next man up. They are in a habit of drafting replacements ahead of time. We've seen it a bunch with this team, especially at defensive back. And Hicks is absolutely the next man up to play that starting role and absorb those box snaps, like you said, which we love for IDP so much. And there's a world where, if he is that starter in place of Justin Reid, then there's a chance that he could be better than Reid for IDP as well. Who, Justin Reid, looking at some of his production, he's finished well below expected, or not well below, but he's finished below expected in his tackle marks in each of the past 4 seasons. So there's room for an upgrade there for IDP as well. So like you said, wouldn't cost a lot to get Jaden Hicks, and like the potential there.
Did not expect the Daniel Sorensen reference today. So that's you can tell this show is going to be great already.
Yeah. Gotta love old Sorensen there, who was constantly kind of out there and just getting tackles, because that was his role. But just not a very good player. So I'm not surprised that he's not around anymore. But so my defensive back I went with Jordan Battle of the Cincinnati Bengals, because I think there could at least be still like some discounted value to kind of capitalize on here, because of the fact that he's just started each of his first 2 NFL seasons as a backup, while really kind of having to earn his spot among the starters each year. And basically that level of perseverance and talent has allowed him to become a starter by the end of each season. Now, finally, heading into year 3 here, I think it should be clear that that Battle is going to be the Bengals' best option to start in 2025 at safety, and there should hopefully be no more attempts to replace him with the, Lou Anarumo is no longer there as defensive coordinator. He's off to the Colts. But like they're trying to use guys like Nick Scott and Von Bell, and it just clearly never worked out. Battle was always the better option, and it eventually the cream rose to the top there. So, if you're looking at the grades, for example, it's not like Battle crushed it in 2024. But if you go back to his rookie season, he was one of the more promising performers among the 2023 safeties as a whole. He ranked 10th at his position in overall PFF grade with an 82.5, which was really strong for a rookie. Again, this past year didn't yield the positive results like that, but the defense as a whole also performed much worse than in previous years. And then you combined, with Bell's inconsistent playing time, I would say there's an argument that, he just wasn't put in a great position to succeed. So here's what I like most of all, because it's often kind of hard to find great reasons why to buy a safety in Dynasty. But on top of the potential full-time starting role right away in 2025, he's also proven to be one of the more effective tacklers at the position. So Battle ranked in the 88th percentile and the 97th percentile in tackles versus expected in 2024 and 2023 respectively, despite not playing more than 524 defensive snaps in a season. So I think if we can get in on Battle this offseason before he kind of takes over a consistent full-time role, it should allow us IDP managers to kind of capitalize early on, to get that consistent high-end IDP production for the position.
Yeah, and I think we see a lot of alignment in what I talked about too before, right? Von Bell is a scheduled free agent. Father Time looks like it might be starting to catch up with him as well. I know it's not always plug and play with the numbers, but if you were to, essentially give Jordan Battle what Von Bell had and put them together, you got 1,100 snaps, you get, 500 plus box snaps. And again, it's not an exact science, right? Because people, the different people, different packages get on the field at different times, but, and Jordan Battle just looks just as good as what Bell was there, and they were happy to plug that in. They got enough other things to figure out on their roster in terms of trying to, get all their stars under contract. So, and me, this is, an anecdotal, eyeball test, but I love the way Jordan Battle played downhill coming out of college too. So even if he doesn't get the number of box alignment that we'd like, he still can be an effective tackler from that deep position. That's just something I always liked about him when he came out and was excited for. And I'm pumped to see him get a full-time role. And I think this is a great value for us here.
Yeah, I hope so. Right. And like you said, yeah, there's a potential there for his alignments to kind of hold, right? And I think, even though it's a new defensive coordinator, it's Al Golden coming in. He's an internal hire as well, right? So he's been in that defensive system that was under Lou Anarumo. So it might not be a significant change. I'm sure there will be some changes, but there's definitely potential there for a strong amount of box snaps for somebody like Jordan Battle to kind of step into as well. All right, let's go on to some sells here at the defensive back position, Jake, and we'll start off with the name that you have picked here from the Indianapolis Colts. Who you got?
We got Nick Cross. Nick Cross, and this is a name I think that a lot of people coming in his rookie season a couple years ago were very excited and thought this guy could really be something. Preseason, he's playing a lot of that box safety role in that cover 3 Gus Bradley defense, and then he just kind of disappeared for us for 2022 and 2023. And everyone kind of wondered what the heck. And I don't know if it was just time, experience, whatever it was that he needed, but he got his opportunity again here. And I mean, looking at the sheet you got pulled up here, he delivered in a big way for IDP for us this year. Now the big thing though, very heavy utilization in that box role, very, very dependent on the tackle scoring that he got there. Personally, I didn't see a lot pop off the screen for me when watching him play where I'm excited about his non-tackle production. And as such, I don't know that I feel great about him being stable across many different types of defenses right now. It's a bit of speculation, but with Gus Bradley's departure, the aforementioned Lou Anarumo coming in here, we could see potentially a lot of the same type of utilization. But again, not everything's one-to-one. You got Julian Blackman, who's done a lot of everything in previous defenses. So it will be interesting to see really where he ends up for. That said, we just see so much variance in the defensive backspace. So this guy just delivered an elite level performance in terms of his fantasy points. I'm always looking to sell at this point. So all those things combined for me make him a prime sell candidate. Now, if someone's not going to give you anything, could you go take Nick Cross and get a Jaden Hicks and a Jordan Battle Plus? I'm willing to take that swing, right? Because then you're getting someone who has a good upside and potentially, now you get another dart throw at whatever else, other positions. But if people are, just telling you, well, yeah, I'll take a throwaway pick, right, for this, well, man, it's not really worth it then. You might as well hold on at that point. But you definitely need to be testing the waters as if you have Nick Cross on your roster at this point.
Yeah, definitely. I'm all for selling Nick Cross. I had written him up in the article as well. I put him at, like, if I can get a third for him, I'd be happy with that, right? We don't want to get greedy with our draft picks, right? A third for defensive back, we're going to take that every time. 100%. Yeah, especially for him, right? Like 141 total tackles in 2024. That was the second most at the position. And that comes from that Gus Bradley role that has helped so many safeties be productive for IDP because it's such a box heavy role. You look at it, 42% of his snaps in the box here. Like, he might never reach those heights again as far as production goes, and just being the defense that it was as well. Like, yeah, Lou Anarumo comes in as the new defensive coordinator. He's going to shake things up a bit. It might not view Cross as that box heavy safety. He might not even view him as a starter, right? So it's hard to say, but like you said, he can still be productive and useful for IDP in a starting role in 2025. But without that amazing usage, he's unlikely to come anywhere close to that 2024 production. That, to me, I'm with you. It makes him a priority trade away IDP this offseason if you can do it. All right. I don't know that I'm maybe emotionally ready to talk about this with a ton of confidence. And I can't promise that I'll be able to follow my own advice with this one for my own fantasy rosters, but removing that emotion from the situation, I will say now is the perfect time to cash out on King Derwin James, who is my next pick here of the Los Angeles Chargers. So James, look, he has been among the most, or maybe if not the most consistent safeties in IDP over the past 4 seasons. He has consistently delivered high-end tackle numbers with a good combination of big plays every single year for the past 4 years. And then in the healthy years, even before that, you add to his dynasty value a little bit because he's one of the more highly regarded safeties in the NFL. So there's no concern about him kind of losing his starting job or anything like that. That provides a level of comfort for IDP managers that are willing to invest in him as well. But at this point in his career, I feel like it might be a good time to cash out on that profile and just get the best possible return. That's what we're really looking for here when we're trying to trade away a player like this, because the value is only going to begin to drop now as he gets closer to his 30s. He's 28 right now, so he's not like overly old or anything like that. So there's room for value to be cashed in on. And if you want to add, some fuel to the sell Derwin fire, I will add that, in each of his previous 3 seasons before 2024, before when Jesse Minter took over as the defensive coordinator, Derwin finished no lower than the 98th percentile in tackles versus expected. That wasn't the case this past year, but he was much closer to average. But that comes with a change in a defensive scheme, right? Under Jesse Minter, it may have played a part in that. Just 50-ish percentile finish in that regard, which it isn't so catastrophic that it killed him either. He still finished top 6 in IDP overall for his position and in points per game. So we have that production to fall back on if you can't move him for like the desired price tag, but it should help, kind of bargaining as we're looking for maybe like a late second here at the very least. You're probably not going to get an early second, but like late second for a Derwin James, I feel like that's our optimal outcome. In trading a player like this away. And I think that's absolutely what we should be trying to do anytime we have a defensive back with that level of value. And again, for Derwin, if you can't move him, if you don't want to move him, it isn't impossible for him to get back to that kind of elite tackling mark. But even if you're like a massive Derwin stan like me, then we should still probably feel comfortable at least fielding fair offers for one of the best safeties in the league and for IDP. So what do you think, Jake? I'm looking to sell Derwin James now. Is this the right time, or am I nuts?
I mean, maybe a little bit of both. No, I totally get it, and yeah, the tackle floor kind of lowering the way it did for him this year is really that thing where it's like, okay, he got propped up by sacks, right? He had, I think 6 total sacks per PFF. He had the highest number of pass rush opportunities that he has ever had to. Is some of this, they didn't have necessarily the linebacking core that they wanted, right? They were able to get Junior Colson, but Denzel Perryman seemed, a shadow of his former self. Deion Henley really popped up and had a great year, but after that, we're not really certain what that's going to look like. So do they invest in that again? Does Colson take a bigger leap? What does that do to Derwin? So I think, to me, he felt propped up slightly by the sacks this year. But that said, I mean, he's Derwin too. Like he makes those levels of play across the field pretty consistently in his career. So but to me, yeah, I think I'm out on him this year, unless, again, don't sell just for the sake of selling, because he might not be as good as he was the previous years. Even a down year for him is still someone that can be relevant in a DB3 role or something like that for us. So don't overreact, but yeah, definitely see what we can get for here. And yeah, I would definitely snap up that for a late second for Derwin James.
Yeah, definitely. All right, let's move on to the defensive linemen now, Jake. We got mostly edges. We got one defensive tackle in here, but let's start off with a defensive end that you are looking to buy this offseason. Who do you have as your first name on the list?
For me, it comes down to Chop Robinson. So a little bit of a youth movement here. Love what he did at the end of the season for the Miami Dolphins, but also only 22 years old at season's end here. So I want to try to get in before a real year 2 breakout happens here for this guy, because this is someone who, based on what we saw this first year, and again, especially in the latter half of the season, really trending in a way that we'd like to see. And the value, I don't know that it's gonna go down at any point in the near future. So this is probably the time to go ahead and get on the Chop train as much as you can. Something that I always love to look at, right, is just that pass rush pressure rate. I mean, I know that actual win rate is very indicative too of success, but when you look at just the ability to, how many times is he rushing and how many times is he actually generating a pressure to that, 17.23% of the time. So you're talking very nearly 1 out of every 5 pass rush opportunities, he's getting into the backfield to cause some sort of chaos, right? And when you look at kind of where he lands in that regard to any pass rusher with at least 100 plus pass rush snaps this last season, he was 5th. And just to put some names around him that, the company he's in, you're talking Micah Parsons at 3, Jared Verse at 4, Nick Bosa at 6, Trey Hendrickson at 7. Again, not trying to tell you this is the level he's at right now, but if you can, as a rookie, perform at that level, and it's not like he had Zach Seiler around him. He's got, Bradley Chubb, some veteran presence there that maybe helped out in that regard, but not much on the field. He really stepped up as a key playmaker on that defensive front for the Dolphins with not a ton of other talent around him. So to me, this is a situation where he's an obvious buy. The big thing I will say is he doesn't bring the tackle floor at this point. Not sure if that's a huge part of his game. So, you definitely want to be looking for the sack production from him. But, I guess take that into consideration if you have some unique scoring setups for your league. But to me, the time to get in on Chop Robinson's now. And let's do it before, anything else happens to see that value keep increasing.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is a great time to get in on Chop. I love what we got from him in year 1. He nearly made my article for DL buys as well. The only concern basically I have right now is what his playing time is going to look like if the Dolphins get a healthy Jalen Phillips and Bradley Chubb back in 2025. Obviously, Phillips is still on his rookie deal with the potential 5th-year option on the table, and then Chubb still on that big extension for a few more seasons. So again, if healthy, those guys probably aren't going anywhere. But that being said, like Chop has earned a significant role where he can build some stronger IDP production than what we even got in his rookie season based on the numbers we saw this past year. 78th percentile in expected sacks. And he got there with fewer pass rush snaps than any other edge within that top 75, top 75th percentile in expected sacks this past season, which is very impressive and a result of his underlying pass rush metrics, which you laid out, right? So that's paired with a really strong college production profile as well. He was like a 97th percentile edge prospect in my model dating back to like 2016 because of his elite college pass rush metrics across the board. And even with the chance that he'd be like a designated pass rusher to start his NFL career. So there's a lot of potential here for this guy as a former first round pick. And even if he is still like a designated pass rusher this next season, like you said, he's just 22 years old and has a lot of untapped potential in the NFL that we can get in on now for relatively cheap before he really pops off. All right, I am going to go with a little bit more of an established vet for my edge buy here. And I do want to apologize ahead of time and get ahead of this for the rest of the offseason for this one, because there's a good chance that I'm going to talk a lot about Alex Highsmith this offseason because I feel like he's one of the more valuable IDPs right now, while still kind of being a little underappreciated to an extent coming out of last season. And this will be one for maybe IDP managers who are looking to contend for a championship in the next few seasons and are in need of that kind of elite player who, again, may not be valued as highly in dynasty formats. But Highsmith is kind of the prime target for me in that situation, especially after an injury-filled season in 2024. So those injuries did kind of keep his value in check, I think, because he missed time due to injury on 2 separate occasions this season, which, to be clear, that hasn't been an issue in previous years for him. He's never played fewer than 16 games prior to 2024. So shouldn't be a recurring issue, I would think, and helping at least provide some confidence that, 2024 was more of an outlier year of lower overall production. Because when you look at Highsmith's underlying metrics, we're looking at one of the best players at his position, even despite managing injuries all season. So he posted top 10 grades across the board, including as a pass rusher, 89.7 pass rush grade, ranked 7th at the position. Also averaging 74% of the team's defensive snaps when he was on the field, which is a great mark for an edge rusher. He's already shown kind of this ability to produce high-end sack totals, so there's not really a concern there. You just look at his 2022 season, and then he's added 2 straight seasons of elite pass rush metrics, which put him among the top 90th percentile in expected sacks per game in back-to-back years. So you add in that playing time, and it's allowed for also one of the better production floors at the position, because he's also ranked among the top 93rd percentile in tackles versus expected this past season. So I don't have much doubt that Highsmith, can't continue to be among the elite IDP producers in 2025. And I think he should come with the kind of ideal combination of cost and potential that's worth targeting for like contending IDP dynasty rosters, where maybe you don't have to pay like a Micah Parsons or Nick Bosa type price to get him, but you can get similar production. And then that's the kind of key for me.
Yeah, my biggest concern with this take is that I don't want anyone else to know this. Highsmith is someone that I'm looking to add on as many rosters as I can this offseason. I am totally with you. I mean, he generated 48 pressures on just under 300 pass rush snaps. I mean, you look at the previous seasons, 500 plus pass rush opportunities, and 69 and 55 total pressures in each of those respective seasons. It's what he could have had right this year if he just had a chance to not be slowed down by injuries. But none of that stuff is anything that I think that is predictive for, the 2025 season. So wheels up, man. Yeah, I want Alex Highsmith on a lot of my rosters.
Yeah, no, he's been excellent. And I think just kind of flies under the radar a little bit too, because obviously playing across from TJ Watt, right? So he gets all the attention, and it just allows Highsmith to just continue to produce at a high rate. So like him quite a bit. And we got a few sells here as well, Jake, at the defensive line position. So tell us who your first sell is at the edge position.
Well, I'm afraid to say it in fear that you won't speak to me again for the rest of the show. But your MVP from the 2024 season, Andrew Van Ginkel, 29 years old at season's end here. Now, 30 is definitely not a death knell for edge rushers by any means, but it definitely is, getting into the older range. Really, what concerns me the most is that he had such great IDP production for us, but the underlying metrics do give me just a little bit of hesitation. We look at I talked about pass rush pressure rate with Chop Robinson up at 17%, Andrew Van Ginkel just over 12%. Very respectable, a little bit above average overall, but definitely not an elite number, right? That at least tells me that, hey, he's trending in the upward direction. He had best sack, best tackle numbers in his career for this year. He finished a second straight season with another defensive touchdown. I think we both know, especially on the IDP side, those are never things to give any merit to. We want to celebrate them because they're great in their week winning, but definitely not something that we should look to depend on. And the thing that really concerns me with the numbers he did produce is he did it with only 43 pass rush wins on the season. Again, every play is different than the one before it, but to me, that makes me feel like some of the things that he got into might have been a little fluky, right? Maybe not something that we can fully anticipate for this to be recurring regularly for him. And as such, when we look at what he did, I'm selling on this, right? This last 2-year high has been great for him. We love it. I hope he has continued success. I just am worried that we're about to hit a cliff here pretty quick, or worst case, or even, just normally see some regression for him. And he's going to be not even close to the value that we got to realize here for the last 2 seasons. So for those reasons, I'm looking to move on from AVG at this point.
No, I 100% with you here. I mean, look, we're looking for kind of an optimal return in trades, right? And I think Van Ginkel increased his value to its peak from this past season, right? Yeah, he was my IDP MVP from 2024, but that production ceiling that he posted, I don't think it gets any higher for him than what we just saw. And you kind of have to cash out on that ceiling now if you can. That's the optimal move as well for me. I don't think that the trade return will likely be any higher than this. So he not only outperformed like his expected sack total by more than anyone else at his position in 2024, but like you said, he also delivered 2 defensive touchdowns. So it just pushed his IDP production even further over the top and into that unsustainable and obvious regression range, right? And the amount of unsustainable production from Van Ginkel, especially when you factor in 66th percentile expected sacks mark, the pass rush grade 64.2, like it makes him a pretty easy choice to try and cash out on, and even more so, especially if you're a rebuilding dynasty roster, he needs to absolutely be out of there at this point. So yeah, give me a second and a third for him. You want somebody that can still be productive. He's not going to do what he did in 2024. It's just not going to happen. So yeah, absolutely with you on selling Andrew Van Ginkel. All right, so my sell here for the defensive line position, I went with a defensive tackle here, and I went with Kohlhagen Cansey of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. So I think there's going to be a lot of excitement around Cansey in dynasty circles, like as just this young first-round player coming off a 7.5 sack season. But I think that optimism is something we can capitalize on because there's reason to believe that it's like overly optimistic based on what we actually saw in 2024. And to be clear, like I do think he's still one of the top dynasty assets at his position. I have him as like DT6 in my dynasty ranking. So he's not a must sell by any means, but there's definitely a concern that he's coming off of what will be one of the more productive seasons for him, at least for the next year or so while he continues to kind of develop. But you look at Cansey's pass rush grade, 64.5, the win rate, 9%. Those numbers put him outside the top 40 players at his position and really point to more of kind of a more volume dependent producer this past season. So I don't want to give him up for nothing. We're looking for maybe like a mid-second, and a mid-third in DT required formats, just because of his youth, his draft capital, the playing time. Those 3 things alone are valuable in any format, especially in Dynasty, and likely allow him to continue as a good producer. But that shouldn't stop IDP managers from kind of shopping him around if you can get an optimal return again this offseason, right? Like one other thing to kind of consider here is that Kancey had to deliver a 97th percentile mark in sacks versus expected at +4 over expected just to average the 10th best defensive tackle points per game mark in 2024. So you look at a guy who only posted average pass rush metrics. Those are the kind of key ingredients to potential regression in 2025. And I think makes now kind of a good time to get a decent return and potentially upgrade at the position for this coming season. I like Kancey. I just think that there's some concern there that we're going to get some regression, and that could take multiple seasons of regression from him as well as he kind of continues to get better. But could be out now, could get back in on him in a couple of years. But for now, I think he's a good sell.
Yeah, I think so too. I mean, unfortunately, some injuries derailed opportunity for him to build up, better volume and better overall numbers potentially. But I mean, what he did, that's something you got to take advantage of right now, especially people seeing, he had kind of a slow start in his rookie year, kind of the same thing. I think he just played just shy of 600 snaps. Then he kind of got around the same mark, but he doubled a lot of his production overall. So there's a lot of, hopium that people are starting to take then when they see those types of things. And yeah, definitely cash out on it because he's not delivering what we'd like to see in terms of pass or run defense snaps either. And that tackle floor that he could really try to bring and solidify him as a week in, week out starter in that DT spot. Now, again, I was one of the biggest believers in Kancey coming in. I was super pumped that he got a landing spot next to Vita Vea. I really thought he was going to have some huge production for us early and often. I was pumped to see that he did do a little bit of damage this year, but I think now's the time to get out and again, he's only 23 years old. Let some other people experience the regression and come back and buy the dip.
Yeah, exactly. Right. Like it's not over for him in his career by any means, but I do think you kind of brace for the regression a little bit, and you could play that kind of stock market game with him where you can sell him at, his high, kind of let him dip a little bit and then come back in on him if you'd like to in a couple of years. So, those are our defensive linemen. Now we'll wrap up with our linebackers, Jake. So we got 4 linebackers to talk about here. We'll start with our first linebacker buy of the 2025 offseason. Who did you put as your linebacker to target this offseason?
One of the fun revelations of this last season, Jamien Sherwood. Not excited how he got to the field, but very excited once he got there and what he did with it. So this one, too, is a little bit of a tricky one because Quincy Williams and CJ Mosley are both under contract for 2025, but they do have a post-June 1st cap savings of $6.5 million and $4 million, respectively. So very potential that the Jets could move on from that, especially with new coaching staff and a defensive-minded coach in Aaron Glenn coming in. Who knows what he's looking to do with it? But I can't imagine a world where they don't make an effort to bring back Sherwood with what he showed us on the field. He's one of those undersized linebackers. I believe he was a safety in college, even converted to linebacker. So playing in today's NFL, his ability to truly play sideline to sideline, but still make plays in the backfield. To me, this is exactly the kind of guy that a modern defense that I believe Aaron Glenn's going to try to run out there is definitely sorely in need of. Mosley struggled to get back on the field, even though, injury designations and reporting was kind of all over the place at the back half of the year. So who knows what's going on there? It's an IDP stalwart that we'd hate to see removed from irrelevancy, but Jamien Sherwood did everything he needed to do to prove that he needs to be back on the field for the 2025 season for the Jets. And if not for them, someone else will definitely give this guy an opportunity. 14.11% tackle rate, very, very strong tackle rate. You see based on your guys' reporting and numbers that, he's above expectation out there. He also just passed the eye test for me when I look at a linebacker. What we love to see, he, again, not the biggest linebacker, so he doesn't always engage, what we'd see traditionally in terms of moving off blockers, but he does a great job of beating the blocker to the spot to be able to make those plays in run defense, in the short passing game. And I'm all on board for what Jamien Sherwood should bring us here in the 2025 season. And I think that there's some upside there potentially too. He did a lot of this on his tackle production, which is key for our linebackers. However, I think he does have a bit to deliver us in terms of the coverage and making some plays there, as well as potentially as a pass rusher. We saw them unleash him a little bit extra at the end of the year. Maybe that was just trying different things. They did go through some different coaching changes, so who knows what that could look like. But again, I think he has the upside there. I think we've only begun to untap what Jamien Sherwood could be for us for IDP.
Yeah, I like this call. I mean, like you said, he's a pending free agent, but and maybe best case scenario is that he's re-signed by the Jets, because then there's less question about how teams will view him, and the Jets were clearly kind of comfortable with him in a starting role. He performed really well in that spot, especially for IDP. But again, it's a new defensive coordinator there as well. I think it's unlikely that CJ Mosley is a starter for the Jets to start this season, just based on the declining play, the injury history. Like you said, there's an out in the contract. I think the Jets very clearly showed us that they were moving on to a succession plan in the form of Sherwood, or perhaps someone else in free agency if Sherwood doesn't stick around. But if Sherwood does go elsewhere too, I think there will be a market for him based on what he showed in 2024 as a starter for the first time in his career across an entire season, basically, right? The grades were solid across the board. He's a former college safety, like you said, so he has some coverage chops, more so than a lot of your typical NFL linebackers. And we've seen him be really efficient and productive, which, should have us maybe more optimistic for IDP purposes. He delivered that 86th percentile score in tackles versus expected. He was a top 12 IDP linebacker in overall scoring for the year, LB 18 in points per game. And just 25 years old, hitting the open market might not be the worst thing in the world for his trade value either in Dynasty. It might open up a chance to acquire him for cheaper, as he's a pending free agent right now, and he'll have a chance to land in a good situation and be viewed as a starter by that team, which is ultimately what we want here for our Dynasty linebackers. So I have him as LB 20 right now in the Dynasty ranks, still feeling cautiously optimistic about his free agent market, with the potential to move up the ranks with the right landing spot as well. So I like Sherwood's potential right now. So for me, I went with Peyton Wilson of the Pittsburgh Steelers here as my linebacker to target this offseason. So for anyone that read my article on linebackers to buy this offseason, you'll know that I kind of stuck with a specific theme of linebackers coming out of their rookie year who I was more optimistic about than going into the season, and guys who I think maybe have a shot to be the next man up in their defense for 2025. So you can check that article out for a few more names there. But the one that I really wanted to highlight and focus on was Peyton Wilson, who was one of the highest graded linebackers of this past year's draft class coming out of college. And if not for injury concerns, he probably goes higher than the third round in the draft as well. I actually got to a point for a rookie linebacker model that I feel more comfortable pointing to it after kind of years of tinkering. And Wilson, even with the draft capital baked in, he owned a 98th percentile college profile, with the worst case scenario, as far as comps inside that cohort, was being Jose Jewell, who he's been a locked in weekly IDP starter for us in years past. But all the other names in that cohort are guys like Roquan Smith, Fred Warner, Micah Parsons, remember he was a linebacker coming out, Devin Lloyd, Jack Campbell, and Devin White. So, all IDP starters in their own right. And, I'll talk more about the rookie linebacker model when Kyle and I preview this year's incoming class in a couple of weeks. But that's just a little sneak peek for now to just kind of highlight some of Wilson's potential IDP comps, assuming he could stay healthy, right? And right away in year one, he made a solid impact as a part-time player while staying healthy for every single game. So I'd also say that he was arguably the Steelers' best linebacker this season, playing mostly on passing downs where he thrived. He earned a top 10 coverage grade for the position, 76.9. That was something that really helped his score in the production model coming out of NC State, and because he was an elite coverage linebacker in that final season. But not only did Wilson play well in more of kind of a situational deployment as a rookie, but he delivered as the team's best tackling linebacker on a per snap basis as well. He ranked 93rd percentile in tackles versus expected. While you look at his teammates, guys like Landon Roberts, who was negative 25.8 tackles below expected, and Patrick Queen, negative 15.1, both of them finished no better than 12th percentile in that regard. So I'm not saying that Patrick Queen is likely to cede the team's LB1 role this season to Peyton Wilson, but I do think it's at least possible that Wilson still earns a larger role as soon as 2025 because Landon Roberts is scheduled to be a free agent, which, if the Steelers so choose, could have Wilson taking on more work on Roberts's early downs that he played in 2024, in addition to the passing down duties that Wilson held as a rookie. So, I will note that the Steelers have shown kind of a tendency to split those LB2 duties among two separate linebackers in the past, but considering how well Wilson performed as a rookie and the potential that they can save resources for elsewhere just by giving a larger role to Wilson, then there's plenty of untapped potential to target here. I think making now arguably the best time to get in on him before that happens and increases his value and price and that it'll take to acquire him. So really like Peyton Wilson right now.
Yeah, I mean, the excitement for Peyton Wilson coming in was high as a rookie, right? And I think all he did was validate those excitement or the hope that everyone had for it. And he's someone I tried to acquire as much as I could because he went to a spot where it was a little bit of uncertainty. Queen was coming in. Everyone predicted him to be the lead linebacker, which he was. But what Peyton Wilson could do, especially in coverage, was so exciting. And he showed he can do that and more. And I think Landon Roberts, his time is likely done, or even if they do bring him back in some sort of team-friendly deal, I think it's more of a situation, like you said, Peyton Wilson comes closer to that 3-down role and, really capitalizes for us here in year 2 and hopefully going forward.
I hope so, man. Yeah, I think there's definitely the potential there. And yeah, as long as he can stay healthy, right? There was always that injury concern, but didn't look like an issue in year 1. So hopefully they can ramp him up and it not be an issue in year 2 and beyond as well. But speaking of Pittsburgh Steelers linebackers, let's move on to your sell in Dynasty right now. Jake, who do you got?
Yeah, I mean, exactly right. From one side to the other, we got Patrick Queen here. Patrick Queen, for me, he's shown us who he is. And what is that? That's a below average tackler in terms of his tackle rate. He 11.76% this year. That was, career average of 11.29. And that's where he's basically settled in every single year. We know what he can do there. I don't see, the defensive scheme isn't changing for any reason that's been made public. I don't know that all of a sudden he's going to step up and change how he plays his game. So that's something that's likely to sit low. So we're going to have a lowered floor for Patrick Queen. We talked about Peyton Wilson coming in and being as successful as he was in the passing game. Now, is that going to limit some greater opportunities for Queen to step up and maybe that even we see his numbers dip slightly lower? The big thing for me, though, and no scheme changes coming forward here at this time for the Pittsburgh Steelers. This was the fewest pass rush opportunities Patrick Queen has seen in his career. And to me, my take on Patrick Queen has always been that's where he thrives, right? And disrupting the pass game as a pass rusher, whether that's, lining up on the D-line, whether that's, some sort of, exotic look blitzing late or over a stunt or whatever it is. He just didn't have those opportunities this year. And as such, we saw his IDP production not hit the levels that we'd like. I just think that bringing in someone who has the true talent and skill set to be a 3-down linebacker in Peyton Wilson, but likely not be the Mike, I think that Peyton Wilson is the one potentially to see some more of those playmaking opportunities where Queen stays in that green dot role and in that Mike role. And that's not his efficient, usage, right? We saw him be successful in Baltimore early on as a rookie with some big plays, sacks, fumble recoveries, forced fumbles, those types of things. Then he struggled in year 2. Then Roquan came in and Roquan locked down the middle of that defense. What happened to Patrick Queen? We saw his production go back up. I don't know that he's, going to take the backseat to Peyton Wilson, like you said, in terms of running that defense. And so unless they find some other way to do that and free up Queen for more playmaking type things, I just can't see him returning to any high level form for us.
Yeah, it always feels like there's always so much, I think, misplaced optimism around Patrick Queen for IDP. And I'm not exactly sure why that is. Like maybe it's because he was a former 1st-round pick and so many dynasty managers spent up to get him in rookie drafts. But he's proven now for multiple seasons that he's not that first round quality linebacker. Even the team that drafted him there moved on from him, right? And with a new landing spot in Pittsburgh this past year, he just kind of continues to underwhelm in the NFL, like you said, outside the top 85 linebackers and PFF grades across the board. He's finished well below average in tackles versus expected every season as well, just 12th percentile in tackles versus expected in 2024. And it's just a common theme for him. He's one of the most inefficient tacklers, like you said, at the position every year because he does a poor job of wrapping up and he does a poor job of being in the right position to even make tackles, right? His greatest attribute for IDP has been that he's been healthy, and at the very least, he's been a compiler, which has inflated his value beyond where it probably should be just because he's played over 1,000 snaps in each of the past 3 years. If he dips to less than that, he's nowhere near being a top 20 linebacker in IDP with these kind of numbers. And if you can sell him for that top 20 return, I think you can potentially get maybe even more than that because people like him quite a bit. Then you should do it because the other shoe is going to drop here for Queen at some point soon. And I don't want to be holding the bag when that happens. And now the last sell on the list for me, I went with a linebacker in Washington, and it is Frankie Louvu of the Commanders. So Frankie Louvu, he has performed well as an IDP over the past few seasons, though probably the most boom bust IDP starting linebacker in the league right now because of how he's utilized and how his production comes. He spent more time rushing the passer than any other linebacker in the league. And he played the second most snaps on the defensive line, which was my concern for him coming into the year. And then every week within the season as well, where if he wasn't getting a sack or other unstable big plays, like his tackle floor is about as low as it gets for full-time players at the position because that usage is killer for tackle efficiency, regardless of the player in that role. Now, because he rushed the passer more than any other player at his position, he found his way to 8 sacks. But I think, anybody that follows defensive production will tell you that those numbers can and likely will regress at any point. So then we got to turn to kind of his overall tackle numbers to see how effective he can be as a tackler. And even taking into account the snaps that Louvu was rushing the passer, which would help kind of lower his expected tackle numbers, he still finished 35.4 tackles below expected on the year, which was only a better mark than 2 other players at the position. So I think it was Quincy Williams and Tremaine Edmonds were lower than that. So this isn't new for Louvu either. Like, it's been a concern for him in each of the past 3 seasons. He's finished no higher than 12th percentile in tackles versus expected since 2022, which is when he became like a full-time starter. So to me, he's much more of like a best ball IDP and not someone I want to have to plug into my starting lineup each week and hope that he gets a sack to save his day, right? But again, he finished as LB 16 on the year. I think his LB 27 points per game is probably a good reminder as to where he more accurately scored and probably should be valued, potentially even lower with sack regression baked in, which is why I think, as IDP dynasty managers, we should probably look to capitalize on that 2024 production now.
That's too funny. I just did a podcast last night for IDP drafts with Scott Soltis, and this is exactly what we talked about, right? That, this type of player is a wonderful roster construction piece in those best ball formats. Right. Exactly for what he is, right? You know how he's going to get utilized. We've seen how he's been utilized over the last 4 years when he's had opportunities. And then, Dan Quinn, very good defensive mind, and he took another off-ball linebacker and turned him into a very good pass rusher. I don't want to say turned him into it. Micah Parsons was very talented before that, but utilized his skill sets appropriately, right? Sure. And I think he did that really well with Louvu in terms of what it means for the NFL field. Now, what does that mean for us week to week in managed leagues? It's a lot harder to feel confidently putting Frankie Louvu in there, especially anything LB2 or higher, maybe LB3 or 4, you're comfortable with that if you got a good roster build. But, for me, no way, man. I would definitely be looking to sell this. I just don't know that he's going to be able to continually put up those kind of sack numbers to make us forget about the tackle floor completely, nearly completely dropping out on us.
Yeah. Yeah, I talked about it a lot in season as well. We were doing the weekly previews. Like he's the kind of player that I just don't really want in like in season leagues, like managed leagues, like you said,
Yeah.
because our boom bust players, we have those already on the defensive line, right? Our linebackers are designed to give us solid production floors to keep everybody else afloat, right? And if our DLs hit, great. But we don't want to have those, that kind of boom bust with our linebackers as well. So it just creates a riskier build. It could definitely pay off when he hits, but yeah, it's just somebody that I think we can cash out on right now, just because the production did come overall in the season that just finished, but it's a riskier proposition for going forward. All right, there you have it. That is 12 IDP dynasty moves that we're looking to make right now. Some of it to try and get done before free agency kicks off, and a few others that make sense at any point this offseason. So thank you all for tuning in and liking and subscribing to the channel. It helps a ton, and I appreciate you all. Also, a massive thank you to the great Jake Kohlhagen for running through these picks with me. Jake, always a pleasure to chat with you, and appreciate your great insight here to make this episode even better.
Thank you, John. Always a pleasure to be here. Happy to do it anytime you need me. And hey, stay active out there. Go get these guys on your roster or get them off your roster.
Absolutely, man. Yeah. So, yeah, again, I appreciate it. And Jake, before you go too, please let everybody know what IDP content you have going on this offseason as well.
Absolutely. So myself and Scott Soltis, Professor IDP, taking over the IDP draft show at the IDP show. So we're going to be talking all kinds of different draft strategies, heavy focus around best ball, especially at this part of the season. However, a lot of the numbers and a lot of the information we got overlays into what you want to do in terms of off-season moves, in terms of redraft, in terms of dynasty. So feel free to check us out there. And other than that, just filling in where anyone will let me talk about IDP fantasy. So.
Awesome, man. You always do a great job. So yeah, make sure you check out Jake's work over at the IDP show. And we will be back with another IDP episode on the week of free agency with the big three from the IDP show as well. Josh, Adam, and Bobby. We're going to be reacting to the first run of IDP signings on that week. So be on the lookout for that. And then it's right into rookie content the week after with Kyle B and this year's incoming linebacker class. So plenty of IDP goodness scheduled all off season long. So thank you again for following along. And until next time, peace out.